I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which I join you today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Welcome to Week 7 lecture content, where we'll focus in on a particular environmental determinant of health, that is, smoking. Critically, it's not just the health risk to the person lighting and inhaling a cigarette that we are concerned with here. Passive smoking is an environmental determinant of disease and illness. What is meant by passive smoking and how specifically might it impact health? Passive smoking is when someone inhales the smoke, either exhaled by someone else or emitted by the tip of a burning cigarette. It exposes the non-smoker to most of the same toxic chemicals as the smoker and may in fact be inhaled more deeply and stay in the body longer than for the person smoking the cigarette. There are a few definitions or distinctions offered on this slide, a good one to have at your fingertips for your next quiz. Distinctions here pertain to what is meant by mainstream smoke, the smoke directly inhaled by the smoker, side stream smoke, the smoke that drifts from the tip of a burning cigarette, and aged side stream smoke, which is side stream smoke that is greater than 30 minutes old. What do we mean by secondhand smoke? Well, as indicated on this slide, it is the sum effect of exhaled mainstream smoke and side stream smoke, both fresh and aged. Aged side stream smoke is particularly toxic. In fact, and this is the critical point, it is up to 12 times more toxic than mainstream smoke. Which leads us to a conversation about children. Why? Perhaps might we be focusing in on children? Because they often lack the autonomy or the ability to avoid exposure to environments affected by secondhand smoke. And as listed on screen, the health effects of exposure to secondhand smoke are significant. We observe a higher risk of sudden infant death syndrome, more serious lung infections such as croup and pneumonia, a 40% increased likelihood of a child developing asthma-type symptoms, and a greater chance of missing school days owing to these health conditions. Enough of me speaking in this video so far. Let's take a look at a health promotion strategy by community for community in regard to secondhand smoke. This short video was curated by Geraldton Regional Aboriginal Medical Service and is pitched at the midstream level of health education or health intervention.
I'm a G-mob, don't smoke around the fam. It makes you really stink and it's bad for the land. Don't smoke around us, we don't smoke secondhand. We wanna be healthy and have a good gym. Be smart, my sister, be smart. Be smart, be smart, my sister, be smart. Be smart. Body is strong, lungs are clear. Ain't nobody wanna smoke around here. Don't start, my brother, don't start. Don't start, don't start, my brother, don't start. Don't start, body is strong.
While the focus is often on children, when it comes to the health implications of secondhand smoke, passive smoking also carries health risks for adults. These are listed on screen and include associations with breast cancer, stroke, respiratory diseases, and loss or reduction in lung functioning. This next slide really zones in on the effects of living with a smoker when you are not a smoker yourself. If this is your situation, then you have a significantly elevated risk of developing lung cancer, an increased risk of heart disease and cardiovascular disease also. And importantly, it has very little to do with the amount of smoke you're exposed to. A low dose of exposure doesn't mean a low risk of, for example, cardiovascular disease. It doesn't map onto risk or risk of disease or illness in a predictable or linear way. What about third-hand smoke? Well, firstly, what is it? We are talking about the smoke that is absorbed onto surfaces such as walls or ceilings, your hair, furniture or toys. The thing about third-hand smoke is that smoke doesn't just stay within these surfaces. Rather, it is ultimately re-emitted into the air over time. It accumulates over time and is part of this picture of health risk also. This slide presents some interesting facts. Even if someone never smokes indoors, the level of secondhand smoke in the home will never be the same as that of a non-smoker. Why? Because of third-hand smoke, because of chemicals deposited on the person's clothing or skin which are carried into the home, or residual smoke coming from the smoker's lungs themselves. So the take-home message here is that even with precautions, for instance smoking outside, there is still risk of exposure to others, most often kids, to chemicals that impact health and are associated with disease and illness. As an example of an upstream intervention, in Australia, legislation was introduced to ban smoking in public spaces. However, there are some exemptions. Some exemptions include, for instance, the declared smoking areas in casinos or declared smoking areas in approved mental health services or in prison exercise yards. In 2010, smoking was banned in cars carrying children or persons under the age of 18, and this was implemented from the 1st of January 2010. This legislation was enabled through growing awareness and public concern for the health effects of smoking, and in particular concern for children within certain environments. This final slide is included to illustrate that when it comes to support for banning smoking in outdoor areas, acceptance for these kinds of restrictions is still quite low. While this data is more than 10 years old now, what it suggests is that there is still a proportion of the population who is in favour of people smoking, for example, on beaches, in beer gardens and outdoor entertainment venues. So there is some reluctance to implement broad stroke bans to smoking in all public spaces. To conclude this lecture, there are some questions for reflection listed on this slide, which we will work through in your upcoming class. Thank you for watching this lecture video on smoking as a specific environmental determinant of health.